They ordered her to pour coffee, but 20 minutes later, every satellite feed went dark. Patrol was trapped in a kill zone, and the only person still calm was the woman they'd mocked. Who was she really? Why did a 4-star general freeze like he'd seen a ghost the moment she turned around? And what secret buried in her past could flip an entire war? This is A Simple Woman's Stories. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, because what you're about to see will leave you stunned. They ordered her to pour coffee, nothing more. A throwaway task in a forward base perched on a hostile ridge, surrounded by mountains where silence itself felt like a threat. 27 minutes later, every satellite feed would collapse, a reconnaissance, patrol would vanish, and the entire command center would fall into chaos. The only person still calm in the storm was the woman holding the coffee pot. Who was she really? Why did a 4-star general freeze like he'd seen a ghost the moment she turned around? And what secret buried in her past could flip the balance of an entire war? In the next minutes, you'll see how a simple woman, dismissed as nothing but background, became the only thing standing between survival and disaster. Stay with us, because what happens at Iron Ridge will make you question every assumption about who's visible, who's hidden, and who truly holds power. This is A Simple Woman's Stories. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and get ready for a twist that will leave you stunned. The transport truck ground to a halt in a swirl of dust and gravel. Specialist Rhea swung her duffel over one shoulder, boots crunching onto the dirt. The thin air clawed at her lungs, high altitude sharpening every breath with cold grit. Fob Iron Ridge was no postcard outpost. It was a scar dug into the mountain, HESCO barriers sagging under rust-colored dust, a skeletal tower scraping the grey sky, soldiers moving with the worn rhythm of people who hadn't slept enough in months. No one looked at her twice. To them, she was just another body, a clerk, an extra bunk filled, another mouth to feed. A corporal with tired eyes and a clipboard ticked her name. Calder, Barracks C, Bunk 7, linens at the quartermaster. Report to the TOC at 0800. His hand flinched toward the horizon like he couldn't be bothered to point properly. She simply nodded, eyes scanning, not as a newcomer searching for directions, but as a hunter mapping terrain. A sagging coil of concertina wire near the south fence. A shadow pocket blind spot near the depot. The lazy shift of a sentry's stance, weight dropping too long on one leg. Her gaze catalogued everything, the way some people breathed. Inside Barracks C, the air was stale with sweat and gun oil. She dropped her duffel onto the top bunk. The metallic clink from inside was too heavy for clothing. A private below raised his head, curious. "First time up this high?" he asked, trying to sound friendly. "No," Rhea said simply, her voice flat even. She turned away, methodical, folding her blanket with hospital corners so sharp you could cut paper on them. The private kept watching, unsettled by the way she moved like she belonged and didn't belong at all. Morning came fast at altitude. At 0800 sharp, she walked into the Tactical Operations Center, the heart of the base. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Maps covered the walls, littered with grease pencil markings. Radios crackled, men spoke in low, hurried tones, the rhythm of war always a step away from breaking. Colonel Grant Holloway didn't look up when she entered. He was a man whose presence filled the room, late 40s, crisp uniform, irritation carved into his features like stone. "Specialist Calder," he said without warmth, tapping her redacted file. "Records management, requisitions, paper clips and spreadsheets. That's your legacy?" He finally lifted his eyes, gave her a dismissive once-over. Dark hair pulled back into a severe bun, expression unreadable. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth his time. "You see this?" he said, gesturing around him. "We deal in bullets and intel here, not file folders." He leaned back, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "We don't have a slot for you, not really. But morale matters. And right now, the pot is empty. His finger pointed across the room at the coffee station. "So until I figure out where to stick you, Black, keep it hot. That's your job." Laughter rippled quietly among the junior officers. Lieutenant Vic Novak, ambitious and sharp-eyed, leaned close to a peer and whispered loud enough for her to hear, "Just don't spill it on the maps." Rhea didn't flinch. She turned, walked to the coffee maker, steady as a metronome. To anyone else, it looked like obedience. To her, it was cover. As she filled the carafe, her eyes swept the room. Frayed uplink cord near the satellite system, a console model number etched in fading paint. She wasn't cataloging coffee, she was cataloging vulnerabilities. Behind her, Novak smirked, satisfied with his joke. Holloway returned to his paperwork. Content that the new specialist was out of the way. No one saw the faint reflection in the steel carafe, the way her eyes scanned faster than any clerk's ever would. She was already building a map in her head, and the first cracks in Iron Ridge's armor were laid bare. The mountain sun never really warmed Iron Ridge. By mid-morning, the wind cut sharper, carrying the metallic tang of fuel and oil across the motor pool. Rhea carried a tray of mugs, silent as ever, moving between groups of soldiers who had already decided she was invisible. That invisibility gave her the angle she needed. Engines roared, then sputtered. An armored personnel carrier coughed twice, shuddered, and died. Mechanics swore, pulling tools from battered crates. A sergeant kicked the tire in frustration, cursing under his breath. This thing was serviced last week, should have run clean. Rhea's gaze slid past without slowing. The hood was up, hands were already digging for the obvious problem. Fuel pump, they thought, but the smear of grime patterns told her something else. The injector lines weren't feeding. That didn't happen by accident. A corporal jogged across the yard, breath short. "Colonel Holloway, sir. Vehicle's deadlined again." From the TOC doorway, Holloway scowled. "Replace the pump. If it's still down, strip it for parts. I don't want excuses." His voice carried command, but not attention. He turned away before anyone could argue. Rhea caught the faint shimmer of liquid drying in the dust near the fuel cap. Not a spill, a siphon. Whoever had done it had been quick, deliberate. The soldiers cursed incompetence. She saw sabotage. The tray of mugs landed on a mess table. Private Noah Ellis, the young soldier who'd noticed her duffel the night before, looked up. His voice dropped. "You see something?" Rhea's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Supply chain's been touched." That was all she said before moving on. The words were simple, almost meaningless to him, but the weight in her tone stuck. Across the yard, Lieutenant Novak saw her pause. He barked a laugh. "What's wrong, Calder? Coffee not strong enough to fix the engines." His grin was sharp, his tone laced with mockery. Others chuckled. The easy laughter of men watching someone else take the ridicule. She neither slowed nor replied. The coffee cups rattled faintly on the tray, her stride steady. Novak smirked at his own cleverness, satisfied he'd reminded everyone of her place. Inside the TOC, the atmosphere thickened. Reports crossed Holloway's desk, minor power surges in the generator. Grid, delayed resupply trucks, missing boxes of small arms parts. On their own, each incident was small, manageable. Together, they were a pattern. Holloway didn't see it. Novak didn't care to. But Rhea did. Standing by the percolator, she watched the power light flicker once, twice. Not a wiring fault. The intervals were too precise. She filed it away. Another fracture line in the structure of Iron Ridge. By afternoon, frustration echoed louder than gunfire drills. Another APC stalled. This time, the crew reported empty fuel tanks, though manifests claimed they'd been filled the night before. The armorer shouted about replacement firing pins arriving bent. A young comms tech swore when his headset cut out mid-check. Holloway rubbed his temple, annoyance carved deeper. "We're not falling apart over spare parts," he snapped. "Sort it. We've got bigger problems than missing fuel." Rhea set a steaming mug on his desk without a word. He didn't notice the way her eyes lingered on the frayed uplink cord just behind him. She stepped back into her corner, hands folding behind her, expression neutral. But inside, the ledger of vulnerabilities grew heavier. Engines sabotaged, supplies siphoned, hardware tampered. The bones of Iron Ridge were being hollowed out while its commander laughed it off. Private Noah crossed paths with her again near the barracks, lowering his voice. "You really think someone's messing with us? Not just accidents?" Her gaze locked on him, steady and unblinking. Accidents repeat when someone writes the script. The words sent a chill through him. She walked on, leaving him staring after her, a question forming that he couldn't bring himself to ask. Night fell hard on the ridge. Wind rattled loose sheets of metal, and the base lights flickered once before steadying. To the tired soldiers, it was just the mountains stealing comfort. To Rhea, it was the mountain speaking in code. Someone out there was already testing the edges. She lay on her bunk in silence, the metallic weight of her duffel at her side, eyes open to the dark. Every failure of the day replayed, aligning in her mind like coordinates on a map. The fractures were no longer small, they were converging. She knew the shape of what was coming, and she knew the others would be blind until it was too late. The next morning, the wind howled harder, carrying a metallic chill that cut through the base like a knife. Rhea moved silently through the narrow alleys between the barracks and motor pool, the tray of coffee mugs balanced effortlessly in her hands. Soldiers hustled past, their boots kicking up dust, oblivious to the quiet observer among them. Yet she noticed everything. A misaligned cable on the communications rack, the subtle swing of a generator's coupler, the frayed insulation along the satellite uplink. Every flaw told a story, every anomaly a warning. In the comms hut, Specialist Leo Park was hunched over a rack of aging equipment. His fingers hovered over the patch cables, checking connections, sweat trickling down his temple. He was young, talented, but inexperienced at reading the chaos that Rhea could already see in full relief. He touched the main junction box, and a sharp arc of electricity lanced through the conduit. He yelped, his body jerking backward, the smell of ozone filling the room. Sergeant Ben Ward was on him immediately, pulling Leo back and cutting the main power. The room hummed with a tense silence, and for a fraction of a second, everyone froze. Holloway stormed in, scowling, anger etched in every line of his face. What happened? Who's responsible for this? Rhea didn't flinch. Her eyes scanned the box, noting the subtle scorch marks, the precise pattern of the short. Someone planted a trigger, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the tension like steel. Not an accident, deliberate, targeted. Novak scoffed, leaning against the doorway. Come on, Calder. A static short? Electrical quirks happen. Stop playing spy games. She didn't answer. Her hands rested on the edge of the console, tracing the circuitry with her eyes. Every detail, the burn, the slight twist in the mounting bracket, the way the insulation had been peeled, spoke of intent. Someone knew exactly how to manipulate this hardware to create fear, to test responses. And Holloway, busy with his usual barrage of orders, didn't see the significance. Rhea moved to the auxiliary console, flipping switches with deliberate precision. She traced power lines back to their sources, mapping the vulnerabilities silently in her head. These anomalies are too synchronized to be random, she murmured to herself, almost inaudible. Noah lingered in the doorway, hesitant to speak. They're setting traps, Rhea continued, now louder, addressing no one in particular. Not just the comms, fuel lines, vehicles, even the generators. Every system has been tampered with. Someone is probing the base, testing how we respond. Holloway's eyes flicked toward her, irritation evident. Calder, your theories won't fix a dead APC. We need action, not... I don't need approval, she interrupted calmly, her gaze unwavering. I only need to see... Her words carried the weight of certainty, a subtle warning the colonel ignored at his peril. Across the room, The hum of electronics seemed to respond to her observation, each flicker in the lights a punctuation to the pattern she was already reading. Rhea's mind worked faster than the room could process. The short in Leo's junction box, the misfiring generator, the siphoned fuel, they were all linked. The disruption wasn't isolated, it was systemic. Someone had designed a chain reaction that, if triggered in the right sequence, could immobilize Iron Ridge entirely. Ward glanced at her, the respect in his eyes faint but unmistakable. Even the skeptical Novak's smirk faltered as he realized the depth of her perception. "You're saying this isn't just bad luck?" he asked quietly. "Luck is never this consistent," Rhea replied, moving to inspect the next piece of compromised equipment. "This is preparation, and preparation means someone knows exactly what to hit and when." Noah swallowed hard. He had watched her silently for hours, and now he understood why. She wasn't just a clerk. She wasn't just the girl carrying coffee. She was a sentinel, mapping every weakness in the base, reading the enemy. His intentions before anyone else could even acknowledge the danger. By the time the sun dipped behind the western ridge, Rhea had catalogued a dozen points of failure, each a single domino in a larger collapse. She returned to her bunk in silence, laying her duffel beside her, hands folded neatly. Around her, the base carried on, unaware of the invisible hand tracing the cracks that could shatter them all. And in that quiet, she began to plan. Not just how to observe, but how to intervene. The base's survival depended on it. And she was already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The sky above Iron Ridge had darkened, heavy clouds blotting out the sun, as if the mountain itself sensed the approaching storm. Inside the TOC, monitors flickered. One by one, the drone feeds went red. The automated satellite links, the lifeline of reconnaissance, failed in rapid succession. Static filled every channel. The young comms specialists tapped frantically, fingers flying across keyboards, voices rising and falling in desperate rhythm. Echo 3 check-in, over. Specialist Leo Park shouted, voice strained. Silence answered, nothing. The northern ridge remained dark, a blind spot larger than any previously recorded. Lieutenant Novak's face drained of color as he repeated the calls. "Sir, maybe it's atmospheric interference?" His voice trailed uncertainly. Colonel Holloway slammed a fist on the desk. "Atmospheric interference doesn't erase an entire patrol. Get me every feed we have. Now!" The officers scrambled. Papers shuffled, radios squawked, and the hum of machinery became an almost unbearable buzz in the small, windowless room. Each failure stacked on the last, a crescendo of chaos. Rhea stood by the coffee station, untouched by panic. Her eyes scanned each flicker of light, each rising tension, cataloging patterns others could not even see. She noticed the timing. The blackout coincided with the exact dead zone she had identified during her first day on the ridge. Her mind mapped it instantly. The northern relay points, the intermittent drone, the predictably delayed patrol check-ins. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had engineered it. Novak turned to Holloway, his voice high-pitched with fear. "We should deploy the QRF immediately. They could be under fire." Holloway's response was rigid, defensive, rooted in conventional procedure. "Negative. We don't react to missing check-ins without confirmation. Keep trying the feeds. Switch to last known positions." He barked orders over the clamor, his face pale, jaw tight. Rhea's hands rested on the carafe. A faint reflection of herself shimmered in the polished metal, her eyes narrowing with quiet intensity. She already knew the truth. This was no ordinary system failure. This was a deliberate electronic warfare attack, calibrated to blind the base, isolate the patrol, and force them into a trap. The tension became physical, almost suffocating. Comm specialists shouted over one another. Monitors blinked intermittently with unresponsive screens. Ward moved between stations, trying to calm the frantic operators, his voice firm but failing to mask the undercurrent of fear. Novak's ideas became frantic, contradictory, overlaid with desperation. Holloway barked commands that conflicted with each other. In that chaos, the Tug itself seemed to bend and warp under the weight of systemic collapse. Then, a single faint, high-pitched squawk pierced the noise. A radio indicator blinked with a fractional signal from the auxiliary console tucked in the corner. No one else noticed it, drowned out by the cacophony. Rhea's eyes lit with recognition. She stepped forward, deliberate, every movement economical and precise, as though she had rehearsed it 1,000 times before. "What are you doing?" Holloway demanded, finally noticing her departure from the coffee station. His voice carried panic and disbelief in equal measure. Rhea didn't answer. Fingers swept over switches, flipping them in a sequence so precise that even the most experienced technicians would not have dared guess. Vacuum tube amplifiers hummed to life. A faint green glow erupted from the decades-old console. The room fell into a tentative hush, eyes flicking toward her as she began typing with fluid, mesmerizing speed. Every keystroke was decisive, almost ritualistic. The cascading lines of raw code rolled across the screen. She bypassed the compromised network, forcing a hardwired connection directly to the base's primary transceiver. Novak leaned forward, jaw slack, struggling to understand. That's manual frequency hopping. You'd have to build the algorithm from scratch. Rhea's gaze remained fixed, hands moving as though the room around her no longer existed. The static resolved, revealing faint bursts of transmission from Echo 3. Coordinates scrolled across the green screen. The patrol was trapped, pinned down under fire, wounded and isolated. The full weight of the moment hit Holloway. He glanced from the ancient console to the monitors that no longer displayed anything, back to the green text, and then to Rhea. The realization dawned. The person he had dismissed as a coffee girl was the only one who could save them. The room held its breath. The frantic shouting faded to murmurs as the staff absorbed what was happening. Rhea's calm authority cut through the chaos like a blade, anchoring the entire TOC. In those moments, it became clear that Iron Ridge's fate rested not on rank or orders, but on the quiet, unseen skill of a single woman standing in the corner with a tray in her hands. Rhea's fingers never hesitated. Each keystroke on the ancient green console carried precision born of instinct and experience. The cascade of numbers, signals, and encrypted bursts unfolded like a language only she could read. The room around her seemed to blur, Holloway barking into his headset, Novak pacing, frantically the comms text trembling at every flicker. But none of it reached her. She was already inside the system, threading through the chaos with surgical accuracy. "Give me a headset," she said without looking up, her voice calm but carrying authority that brooked no argument. Specialist Park handed it over, fumbling slightly. She slipped it on, one hand still flying across the keyboard while the other adjusted the receiver. Static resolved into a faint, distorted voice. "Echo 3. I have you," Rhea said, voice a sharp blade cutting through the static. "Send location data in a single burst. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." A high-pitched squeal erupted in the headset, followed by a string of encrypted coordinates that scrolled across the screen. Holloway leaned forward, eyes wide, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "How? You bypassed everything." Rhea's gaze remained fixed on the console. Everything standard was compromised. "I built a narrowband frequency hopping signal on a non-standard channel. The auxiliary console isn't part of their network. I'm the only connection they can't jam." She didn't pause, didn't gloat. Each word was clinical, precise. Novak, mouth agape, tried to speak but faltered. You bypassed the main array using that old hardware," Rhea said, eyes scanning for anomalies. "It's obsolete enough to be invisible to them. Every move I make exploits assumptions they've already made about us. That's how we locate Echo 3. The coordinates on the screen aligned with the dead zone she had mapped on her first day. Her eyes traced the lines, calculating elevation, obstacles, and the enemy's potential overwatch positions. The patrol was pinned in a box canyon, communications and navigation disabled, wounded, and exposed. The entire situation that had thrown Holloway and his staff into panic was now entirely visible to her. Holloway finally spoke, voice tight with restrained panic and awe. "Calder, your plan? What do we do?" Rhea didn't look up. She traced a path on the digital map with her finger, moving swiftly but deliberately. The enemy expects a direct approach. If we send a conventional QRF along the southern road, they'll be ready. Instead, a small team will move through an old ventilation shaft 10 miles east. It's collapsed on paper, but thermal scans suggest it's partially open. They'll emerge behind the enemy's overwatch, achieving total surprise. Sergeant Ward, listening closely, nodded slowly, respect deepening in his eyes. Novak's mouth hung open. He had proposed sending the full QRF blindly into the canyon. Holloway's scowl softened, replaced by a tight-lipped understanding that his authority was, in this moment, secondary to her expertise. Rhea continued, setting up the plan with clarity and precision. The main QRF moves along the road as bait, loud, visible, obvious. They draw fire and attention. The small team will complete the exfiltration without detection. Timing is critical. I'll configure 2 handheld repeaters for low-frequency communication inside the shaft. 1 burst transmission at the exit for confirmation. Novak finally found his voice. You want us to risk the small team alone?" Rhea looked at him directly, voice calm but firm. "They won't be alone. They'll have everything I can give them, including intelligence the enemy doesn't know we have. The distraction ensures they move undetected. It's high risk, but controlled." Holloway swallowed, tension in his throat. "Specialist. You have the board. You see what the rest of us cannot. If you say this works..." His voice faltered, the pride of command clashing with the reality before him. "Then you lead." The silence in the TOC was absolute for a moment. Every officer, every NCO, every junior specialist waited for her decision. Rhea's hands hovered over the console, a momentary pause in her flurry of activity. She nodded once, sharply, and began issuing commands. Each instruction precise, concise, and unquestionable. The room moved as her mind dictated. The chaos had a new anchor, and it was a quiet woman who had once only served coffee. No one spoke as the plan solidified. Holloway leaned back, fists clenched on the desk. Novak swallowed hard, realizing the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Ward, steady as ever, adjusted his gear with silent acknowledgement of her leadership. Even the young specialists glanced at her with wide eyes, understanding that Iron Ridge's survival depended entirely on the person they had dismissed. And in the corner, Rhea's calm eyes swept across the TOC one last time. Every vulnerability logged, every weakness accounted for. Every player in the room now moved according to her design. The stage was set. Echo 3 was alive, but only because she had already seen the path that no one else could. The battle, invisible to the untrained eye, was about to shift, and the coffee girl would not be just a background figure any longer. The sun was barely over the horizon when Ward's team moved out. Dust swirled in their wake as they slipped into the shadow of the old ventilation shaft. Each step was calculated, each movement silent. The small team carried only essential gear, lightly armed, every motion, rehearsed in their minds, every potential obstacle anticipated. The shaft, marked long abandoned on outdated maps, had partially collapsed, but Rhea's careful cross, referencing of thermal scans and old geological surveys, revealed a faint but navigable opening. Inside the TOC, Rhea monitored every feed she could coax from the auxiliary console. Her hands danced across switches, manipulating low-frequency repeaters she had installed earlier. Every flicker on the monitors, every minor squawk of static, was a heartbeat she could read. She wasn't watching numbers, she was watching lives. Rhea, they're moving through the shaft. Ward's voice came faintly over the encrypted channel, calm but taut. Entry is tight. Sensors show pressure points at 3 critical junctures. Maintain formation, conserve momentum, and trust the path, Rhea instructed. Voice steady and clear, every word slicing through the chaos of the TOC. The Colonel and Novak leaned forward, eyes fixed on the green glow of the console, barely daring to breathe. Every calculation she had made, the enemy overwatch, patrol timing, terrain, hinged on these precise movements. Above ground, the main QRF rolled along the southern road as planned. The vehicles rumbled loud and obvious, stirring dust that caught the first light of day. Soldiers crouched behind turrets, weapons visible, radio chatter deliberately audible. It was a show of force, a decoy to draw attention away from the unseen infiltration happening 10 miles east. Holloway's jaw tightened as he realized the audacity of the plan. He had trained for conventional warfare, standard approaches. This was none of that. Back in the shaft, Ward's team emerged behind the enemy's overwatch positions, just as Rhea had predicted. Snipers were taken off guard, their surprise complete. The engagement was swift, precise, no wasted movement, no unnecessary noise. Echo 3 scrambled from the canyon floor, battered but alive, guided along the route Rhea had designated. Each step, each handhold, each leap was accounted for. The trap had been dismantled from within, and the enemy never realized they had been outmaneuvered until it was too late. In the TOC, Rhea watched their progress like a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of calculated movements. Novak's face was pale as the scope of her authority became unmistakable. Holloway's pride battled with awe. He leaned back, fist tightening on the desk. Realizing that the survival of Echo-3 was entirely in her hands, the coffee girl was no longer just a clerk. She was the central node, the pivot on which the fate of Iron Ridge turned. "Signal from the exit point is strong," she murmured, fingers flying across the console. Ward's team acknowledged, and the last members of Echo 3 passed through the ventilation exit unscathed. The small team moved seamlessly, avoiding the kill zone entirely. The decoy QRF drew sporadic fire from a token enemy contingent left deliberately in place, but the engagement was superficial. Just enough to convince the opposition that the base was committing its full force to a direct approach. The first relieved sighs in the TOC went unnoticed by Rhea. She was already configuring the final burst transmission. Every repeater, every low-frequency link, every analog console she had, touched during the past tense hours, hummed with quiet efficiency. She wasn't celebrated yet. The room remained tense, every officer unsure how to interpret the calm authority radiating from a woman they had dismissed just hours earlier. "Coordinates confirmed," Rhea said finally, breaking the silence. She removed her headset, eyes sweeping the TOC. The rescued patrol had made it. The small team, the decoy, the intricate timing, every element had succeeded. Holloway swallowed, voice hoarse. "Calder, you've saved them all of them." Novak could only nod, mouth slightly open. Ward, always understated, gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement that carried far more weight than any words. Even Leo Park, who had nearly been electrocuted in Act 3, looked at her with a mixture of reverence and disbelief. The hierarchy of command had shifted silently, and Rhea occupied the center. She didn't smile. There was no celebration in her eyes, only the quiet precision of someone who had done what had to be done. And then the rotor blades cut through the high-altitude wind, louder and more insistent than the light utility choppers that serviced the base. A Black Hawk descended, kicking up a storm of dust and gravel, its fuselage emblazoned with the insignia of a 4-star general. General Elias Monroe, commander of all regional forces, stepped onto the ramp, every stride commanding attention. His eyes scanned the TOC, cataloging every detail, the failed primary consoles, the near panic among his staff, and the small group gathered around the auxiliary console. For a moment the general stopped, his gaze locked on Rhea. The rhythm of his heartbeat seemed to pause. This was not just the calmness of an operative in control, this was recognition. Monroe's face went pale, the weight of memory pressing down on him. He had seen this woman once before, in a mission so secret it was spoken only in whispers at the highest echelons. Nightingale, the operative officially declared Rhea 5 years ago. Yet here she was, standing in front of him, orchestrating the survival of an entire patrol with the ease of a master craftsman. The talk went silent. Holloway's jaw slackened, Novak froze mid-breath, Ward's hands rested tensely at his sides. The coffee girl, dismissed, mocked, overlooked, was no longer invisible. She was a force, a shadow operative whose very presence demanded recognition. The Black Hawk's rotor blades still thumped against the thin mountain air when General Elias Monroe stepped into the TOC, his boots echoing on the steel grating. The room, once buzzing with tension, froze. Every head turned instinctively toward him, every officer suddenly aware of the hierarchy he represented. Holloway straightened, Novak stilled, and even Ward paused mid-step, sensing that. The calm of the past hour was about to collide with authority at its apex. Monroe's eyes swept the room in a practiced glance. The failed primary consoles, the frantic movements, the rescued patrol's coordinates, already marked on paper, everything was visible to him in a heartbeat. And then his gaze settled on her. Rhea Calder, hands resting lightly on the corner of the auxiliary console, fingers still smeared. With the faint residue of the old hardware she had resurrected, eyes calm and unwavering. Her posture, precise, economical, every detail under control. The very presence of the woman who had orchestrated the rescue in near silence held him captive. For a single heartbeat, Monroe's mind reached back through layers of classified memory. The whispered name, the operation that had decapitated enemy networks without. A single shot fired, the operative officially listed as Rhea 5 years ago. Nightingale. He felt a chill, a gut reaction older than reason. His eyes widened, pupils dilated as the room around him seemed to blur. "Colonel Holloway," he said, voice controlled but cold, every syllable slicing through the static tension. "Report." Holloway swallowed, aware but unsure, every instinct screaming that. The man before him was no longer processing standard procedure. "General, sir, there was an electronic warfare attack. The patrol, Echo 3, we lost contact. Specialist Calder." Monroe's gaze never left Rhea. The words froze in Holloway's throat. The general's mind rewound past every briefing, every closed-door session where Nightingale, his name had been whispered like legend, a ghost that haunted operational history. He stepped forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring aides. The room seemed to contract around his presence. Rhea turned slightly, acknowledging his attention with nothing more than a calm tilt of her head. She didn't smile, she didn't flinch. Her hands rested lightly on the console, her focus absolute, yet for the first time, something faint flickered in her eyes. Recognition, not surprise. The room went silent. Novak's lips parted, then closed again. Ward's hand drifted to his sidearm unconsciously, tension coiling in the pit of his stomach. Even Holloway felt the shift. The quiet authority she wielded over life, logistics, and strategy was absolute, undeniable. Monroe's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the auxiliary console. "Nightingale." The word lingered like a thunderclap, reaching corners of memory the others could not access. Names, operations, classified kills, all flashed through his mind. This was no clerk, no specialist. This was the ghost operative he had once authorized into missions so secret that their outcomes had been denied existence. Rhea spoke finally, her voice calm, unwavering. "General Monroe, Echo 3 is safe, the patrol is extracted, QRF engaged in decoy as planned. The base is secure." Monroe's lips parted, a breath caught in awe and disbelief. The office was no longer a chain of command, it had become a stage for revelation. The men around her, Holloway, Novak, Ward, watched the interplay of recognition and control, of fear and respect, unfold silently. "You orchestrated this," Monroe continued, eyes piercing. "From that console?" Rhea nodded once, expression impassive, every failure catalogued, every vulnerability noted, every outcome predicted. "I didn't react, I controlled." A tremor ran through the room. Novak's smirk vanished entirely. Holloway's jaw clenched. The young comms specialist stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. She had taken what they considered chaos and turned it into precise surgical control. Monroe's gaze lingered, searching for a trace of the operative he had once relied on, only to find the same quiet confidence that had haunted enemy networks and inspired legends. He straightened, taking a slow breath, and the room exhaled with him. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. Then Ward stepped forward, a subtle nod of acknowledgement, eyes locked on Rhea with quiet reverence. Holloway, despite his pride, extended a hand, the gesture of acknowledgement heavy with humility and respect. "Specialist Calder," he said, voice steady now measured, "your reassignment to administrative support is revoked. Effective immediately. You are attached to this command team as a senior tactical advisor." The room shifted as officers and specialists alike recognized what had transpired. She had saved lives, neutralized systemic failure, and navigated a crisis the likes of which none had anticipated. Rank was irrelevant. Skill, focus, and foresight defined her authority now. Rhea accepted Holloway's handshake with calm precision, meeting his gaze evenly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The acknowledgement hung in the air, heavier than any order or salutation, a recognition earned in fire and calculated silence. Monroe, still processing, finally nodded toward her, his expression a mix of awe and caution. I believed you were gone," he said softly, voice almost breaking the quiet. "Nightingale, I never thought." She turned, eyes lifting to meet his briefly. "Some ghosts don't stay buried, sir." The room remained silent, the weight of the moment pressing on every officer present. The coffee girl was gone. In her place stood a sentinel whose presence alone commanded the attention, obedience, and respect of all who served around her. Even as Echo 3 returned safely to the base, the reverberations of her actions rippled through Iron Ridge. Every soldier who had doubted, mocked, or ignored her now acknowledged her. Not through words, but through the recognition of her undeniable authority. And in that recognition, the entire command structure subtly realigned with a single woman at its center. As the sun rose over Iron Ridge, the base seemed transformed. Soldiers moved with quiet purpose, their paths subtly diverting around the sentinel who had once been dismissed as nothing more than a coffee girl. Rhea Calder stood at the western perimeter, rifle in hand, coffee warm at her side. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here because someone had to watch over the lives that depended on her skill, calm, and judgment. Her respect was earned silently, through actions, through competence, and through a presence that could shift the balance of life and death in an instant. From the TOC to the farthest observation post, the story of today would be remembered, not in papers, not in reports, but in the acknowledgement of those who had witnessed it. A quiet sentinel, a ghost who refused to stay buried, had reshaped the command, redefined authority, and reminded everyone that true capability could never be measured by rank alone. Thank you for joining us for this story. If you've been inspired, surprised, or amazed by Rhea's quiet mastery and the way she turned the tide against impossible odds, make sure to subscribe to A Simple Woman Stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next incredible tale. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Did Rhea's calm precision surprise you? Have you ever witnessed someone completely underestimated reveal their true abilities? Let us know what you think and tell us which moments left the biggest impression. And don't stop here. Check out the next videos waiting for you at the end screen to dive into more stories of courage, strategy, and silent heroes who change the world without asking for attention. Every story has a lesson, every moment a hero, and every viewer a place in our community.